Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started then. My name is Teresa Ibarra. I'm the Associate Director at the Office of Student Financial Aid in the College of Medicine. Today I have with me Alex and Andrea from Student Money Management Center of the University Financial Services and Cashier Operations. So today the session is on budgeting and credit and how the basics of it, and then also about how financial aid ties into it. So we're just going to start with Alex first. She's going to go over, and thanks for coming.
Okay. So before I delve into the budgeting aspect of the presentation, I want to talk a little bit about who we are. As Teresa said, we're the Student Money Management Center, and we're a division of USFSEO, which is the people that bill you. We're the accounts receivable, and also we do student loans and collections, so we're a division of them. What we do is we help students better manage their money in school and beyond. The services we provide are plenty. We provide financial literacy resources through our website, and we also deliver workshops like we do like here today, and we have webinars. We also do budgeting assistance through peer-to-peer mentoring, so if someone wanted to come in and schedule an appointment, we could do a one-on-one session. And our website is, I'd just like a quick note about that, our website is really chock full of information and resources and templates, and we'll talk a little bit more about that further. So the agenda today is first we're going to talk about budgeting, spending decisions, planning ahead, techniques of budgeting, considerations to make when you're budgeting. As for credit, we're going to be talking about establishing good credit, consequences of poor credit, and the importance of monitoring your credit. So, as some of you may know, the fourth-year student probably especially knows how important wellness is for your life, especially financial wellness. It seems that when one aspect of your individual wellness is off, it can affect other parts of your life. So the key to financial wellness is balance, and excuse me, sorry. The key to financial wellness is balance, and we think that that can be done through budgeting. So budgeting is a plan. It is knowing what money is coming in and what money is going out, basically knowing what your expenses are and what your income is to plan for your future and to plan for your life. It's really important to be flexible because some months are going to be more expensive than others, say December, January, when Christmas, traveling, visiting family members may come up, and some months may be more frugal. So it's important to be prepared and be willing to be flexible about your budget. There's also expense tracking, which is really, really important because it's the only way to monitor your spending and thus the only way to measure your budget and to measure how well your budget is doing. When you're planning ahead and making goals for yourself in regards to your budget, it's important to set SMART goals. So that's specific, measurable, agreed upon, realistic, and timely, which Andrea will go over a little bit further. And also keeping emergency savings. That can't be stressed enough. It's so key because sometimes life just happens and you deal with unforeseen circumstances, so having that cushion allows you to have that safety net, and that's really, really important. Also, it's important when you're planning ahead to change your spending plan, to modify your spending plan as needed. So that's where that flexibility and expense tracking comes in, because a lot of times you need to look at what you're spending. So if you realize that maybe you're spending more on eating out or clothes, you can kind of harness your spending and pull back in certain areas and just be willing to be flexible and modify as you go on.
Thank you, Alex. So as Alex mentioned, my name is Andrea Pellegrini. I'm the Assistant Director of the Student Money Management Center. With SMART goals, we really want you to dream big. You're going to be doctors. You're going to be awesome. You're going to accomplish lots of things in your life. We did a survey a couple months ago on medical students and what their financial goals were as well as their career goals. Almost all of them mentioned wanting a home. But if you're setting that goal for yourself, is that a SMART goal? Is it specific? What kind of house do you want? Where do you want to live? Are you sure you want to live there? Is it measurable? Do you know how much money you're going to need in order to make that down payment? Or do you know how much money you're going to have to be pre-approved for when you go to the mortgage and office or loan officer to see if you can actually afford that specific house? Are you making sure to communicate with your spouse or your family members to make sure that they want the same goal? Maybe they don't want a house, maybe they want a condo, maybe they want a trailer, maybe they don't want to travel the world instead. In addition to that, you want to make sure that it's realistic. Are you going to be able to afford that house in your residency? Maybe not. It depends on what your goals are. Is the amount of money that you're going to need going to be able to be saved by the time you end your residency? And making sure it's timely. So you need to set a date. I'm going to have $20,000 for down payment accomplished in 4 years, based on what my budget is and what my other financial responsibilities are. I think that I can accomplish that. But unless you're willing to set those specific goals and dream big, you're not actually going to accomplish those goals. There's a lot of research out there that suggests that if you write down your goals and you make them specific and measurable, agreed upon, realistic, and timely, then you're more likely to achieve them. I'm going to hand it over to Alex again.
So expense tracking. There are several methods of expense tracking. The first one is the traditional paper and pencil. That's literally just writing down everything that you spend or drawing out your own template and doing it from there. There's also computer-based methods, using an Excel spreadsheet or going online and finding a template that you like. It's also should be noted that our website, the SMMC website, has a lot of free resources for budgeting templates that you guys can use, download, save to your computer, and use them every month. So that's really cool. And then there's also smartphone apps, which is my preferred method because I don't want to do a lot of work when I'm budgeting, and this does all the work for me. So there's an app called mint.com that aggregates all of your banking information and tracks your expenses for you and tells you where exactly your spending is going and puts it into categories, so you can kind of say, spending a lot on dining out this month, maybe I should pull that back. So smartphone apps are really great because they automate things for you, and it's good for you guys especially probably because you're going to be so busy with school. Important budget considerations. Well, obviously, your primary expense as medical students is going to be your tuition and fees, followed by your living expenses. Other important income considerations would be your loans. That's probably, for many, going to be your primary source of income. And also, don't forget about grants and scholarships. Those are great because they don't have to be paid back, as you guys know. So needs versus wants. This is a pretty simple concept related to budgeting. It's basically before you make a spending decision, just knowing, is this a need? Do I need this to survive? Is this under the category of housing, clothing, food, or is this a want? Is this an extra? Oftentimes, the food example, we need food to live, but do we need to eat out 3 times a week, or do we need to get that takeout? You know what I mean? So it's making wise spending decisions and thinking about, do I need this or do I want this before you make the spending decision. Sometimes just asking yourself that question before you make the purchase can make all the difference. And there's several different financial tools. The first one that I want to highlight, and this picture is actually of Student Loan Hero, and we have a handout of it over on that table there, and it's a really cool student loan tool that we actually just partnered with. USFSO just partnered with Student Loan Hero, and basically they aggregate all of your federal loans and put them into a dashboard so you can see very clearly what each loan costs, what the principal is, how much interest has accrued, what your monthly payments could look like depending on your repayment plan. You could set up monthly reminders. So it's a really cool tool to try and make student loan repayment more transparent. I mentioned the different budget templates that you can find on our website or on the online, different apps like mint.com. There's also different websites like learnvest.com and intuit.com that offer a variety of budgeting tools and expense tracking tools. There's also reward programs. We have another handout with the You Promise program by Sally Mae. It's basically you sign up for this program called You Promise and you get rewards and cash back for different purchases that you make, and they partnered with thousands of different companies, so it's a really cool incentive program. And then there's also the financial products that you guys use on a day-to-day basis, savings accounts, checking accounts, online banking, etc.
Thank you, Alex. I'm going to talk a little bit about credit. I'm going to ask a question, though, first. So which one of you wants to tell me what credit is? So we have history of spending and repaying bills. Suggestion? Comment? Okay. Well, actually, credit is a financial tool, but your credit history is an important aspect of that tool, and whether or not you can use it in the future, so it's important to monitor. But it can also be used irresponsibly or responsibly in order to accomplish financial goals, and there are a few things that you need to know about it before making any spending decisions with credit. So which do you think is safer as far as cards go, a debit card or a credit card? So A, or B? Congratulations, you are correct. So when it comes to credit, you're only liable for up to $50 of the charges that are made on your credit card if it's stolen. With a debit card, depending on your financial institution, you could be liable up to all of it, everything in your account, and you won't get it back. So if you're making purchases online, if you're dealing with some shady places, it may be more beneficial to use credit. Also, if you travel a lot, you're going to get better benefits and less locks on your card if you use a credit card. A lot of hotels won't accept debit cards, or if they do accept debit cards, they're going to lock the debit card, so you won't be able to use it again until after the purchase has gone through. Ooh, apologies, guys. So one of the upsides to credit is that you can buy now and pay later. Obviously, we like that instant gratification. With that also comes a lot of responsibility. So you can also be protected against fraud, like we mentioned earlier. It's sometimes a good method to cope with emergencies, especially if you have limited funds available. Unfortunately, it can also put you in a lot of debt if you use it frequently to cope with emergencies rather than having an emergency fund. Obviously, we've mentioned how with hotels it's important to use a credit card rather than a debit card if you want to have access to your money. So it's convenient for making reservations. And it's also extremely beneficial if you're trying to establish any type of credit history, which credit history, as one of you mentioned, is an important aspect of maintaining your eligibility for credit in the future, but it also can be used as a part of a background check if you would want employment, usually in financial services, particularly in the state of Illinois, but in other states that you may be seeking employment, it may be used as part of your background check as well. So some of the downsides to credit is the fees and interests that can accrue and often do accrue if you don't pay off your bill every single month. Credit can also make it extremely easy to overspend and can damage that very important credit history. So it's important that you have behaviors in place and techniques in place to help prevent overspending as well as interest accrual. So maybe you make sure not to make any major purchases on your credit card until you have enough money in your savings account in order to pay it off that same month. so that you're not accruing any interest, but you're still getting the benefits of security as well as maybe rewards if you have a rewards card. In addition to that, someone could steal your account number, but that can happen with a debit card, that can happen with your driver's license. So that is just making sure that you're securing all of your cards as well as your personal identification. So something called the Credit Card Act of 2009 really limited the amount of credit cards that were available or made available to college students. It was primarily targeted towards undergraduate students, so any person under the age of 21 cannot get a credit card unless they have a cosigner or they have proof of income, which is sometimes hard to come by. So some people are moving towards something called a secured credit card, where a financial institution provides you a very limited amount of credit that coincides with a savings account or a CD that is for the same amount. So you're still accruing a credit history and making your on-time payments, but if you don't make your on-time payment, they will pull all of your money out of your savings account that's attached with that secured card in order to pay it off. And you may not be eligible to have a card again. But it's one method of establishing a credit history that works in favor of those people under 21, which I can't imagine very many of you would be under 21. But you might have a spouse that's under 21 that would have difficulty obtaining a credit card under their own name, which they've recently decided to loosen up the legislation on that. So we'll see how that affects credit card debt in general in the younger population in the future. This Credit Card Act also prohibits certain billing and payment practices. So now you have kind of a truth in lending statement on your credit card statement that shows you if you pay it off, how long it would take you to pay it off if you're only using the minimum payment, or if you pay $10 more or $20 more, how much less time it will take you and how much less interest you're going to pay in the long term. So that's an important aspect to pay attention to, and making sure you know how to read your own credit card statements, obviously. Another aspect that you may not be aware of is the fact that new credit card accounts cannot change their interest rate for 12 months. Sometimes they used to have introductory rates for 3 months or 6 months, and then they hike from 0.9% to 25%, which is a huge spike. So now you're guaranteed that introductory rate for at least 12 months, but you need to be aware of how that could change in the future. So some other things that you need to be aware of when it comes to credit card law is that the law does not limit how much your interest rate can rise if you're 60 days late. So on top of having a 30 and 60-day late blemish on your credit history or credit report, you could also have an increased rate on what you've borrowed. So it could spike exponentially. Your minimum monthly payment could change due to that or due to a change in regulations. And you could also be subject to new fees, since the legislation hasn't said no to new fees. A side note from credit is that if you use prepaid cards, there is no legislation to protect you against fees not being disclosed. So you need to be extra careful if you use a prepaid card in lieu of a debit card or a credit card, because the financial institutions that are providing those types of financial vehicles are not necessarily required to tell you all of the fees associated with it. So, and that includes checking your account, that includes how many transactions you do in a month, that can include a monthly fee, that can include a yearly fee. So the list goes on. You need to make sure that you're well aware of the reputation of the company that you're getting a financial tool from, as well as what aspects that you may have overlooked or could potentially overlook. So there are a few things that are included in a credit score that you are going to want to be aware of if you're worried about a credit score or your credit history. And just so you're aware, credit scores can vary drastically between companies, between the institution that's requesting the report, between the 3 bureaus that are liable for credit reporting history. So there's no magical explanation as to how things are calculated, but we do know that there are certain factors that are considered when calculating a credit history or credit score. So your payment history, making sure that all of your payments are on time. Are you making sure that you're not paying 1 day late or 6 hours late in some cases? Because that can be construed into 30 days late, depending on how the financial institution holds payments. Your debt to available credit ratio, so are you maxing out your credit cards or are you using 30% of your credit cards? That's going to make a big difference on what your credit score is when it's pulled. Your length of credit history, so how long have you had your cards is important, or how long have you had your installment payments. If you have a card that you have had several years, it's good to keep that card if it's important for your credit history long term. Do you have installment payments? Do you have recurring debt like a credit card? Making sure that you have a varied credit portfolio so that creditors are aware that you're able to manage multiple types of financial tools. And how frequently do you have new credit inquiries? So there's something called a soft pull and something called a hard pull. The difference between the two is a hard pull actually shows up on your credit report and a soft pull doesn't. So when you get credit card offers in the mail, those are typically from a soft pull from credit card companies. But if you would go actively seek out a mortgage or seek out an auto loan, that's typically a hard pull. And I know that the Grad Plus loan is a hard pull, which Teresa will talk more in depth about later. What is not included in your credit score? So obviously something that you would think would be on your credit score or considered in your credit score is your age, but that's not true. You also might think that your sex or race or length of employment would be, but that's also not true. Your marital status also isn't included, as well as your income and education, though assuming that being doctors you would have high income potential, that is not something that is reported in your credit score. It may be something that a creditor requests though. They want to know, are you employed? Do you have the ability to repay us? But it's not something that's actually calculated in the score that's available. Other things that are not in your credit score is whether or not you've been turned down for credit, the length of time at your current address, whether you own a home or rent. And if you are turned down for credit, you can request your credit score, by the way, just an FYI. So if you are worried about getting in trouble with credit, there are a few signs to be aware of. So if you don't know what your total debt is, that includes your student loans. If you don't know what your total debt is, you're at risk of getting in credit trouble. If you use one card to pay off the balance on another, that's obviously a risky behavior. If you get frequent cash advances or you go to payday loan places, that's a sign of credit trouble as well. And if you max out credit. I have maxed out credit before as an undergraduate, and it is not fun to recover from. So don't do it, especially as medical students. An important part of monitoring your credit and your credit history is just being aware of how it affects your life. So there are 3 credit bureaus that collect information about your financial practices. Experian, TransUnion, and I forgot the other ones, but it's an important one, obviously. Other businesses use that information from those 3 credit bureaus to make, Equifax, thank you, to make decisions on what your interest rates on loans are going to be, whether to rent you a place to live or give you a job, and often insurance rates. So if you have better credit, you may get to pay less for your auto insurance. So the best way to monitor your credit, since a credit score can vary so widely and you don't need to pay for it every 3 months, is just to check your credit report. And there's a lot on the internet and on TV about checking your credit on freecreditreport.com, but that's not actually free. You want to use annualcreditreport.com, and that'll give you a detailed list of what is in your credit history, what accounts are available under your name, how things have gone thus far in your credit life. And you can also work through annualcreditreport.com if there are any issues on your credit report to have them resolved. You can submit a complaint or proposal and go through the process to get that taken care of. So if you do run into credit trouble, there are a few things that you can do to resolve it by talking to your lender. You want to ask for a lower interest rate. Obviously, you want to do this before you have an issue with them and they've hiked it 30%. You can ask for a lower credit limit to avoid having an issue in the future, making it more manageable for yourself. You can also ask to change when your bill is due. Maybe it's not convenient for you to pay at the end of the month. You can ask to pay at the beginning of the month or in the middle of the month, whenever is more convenient for you or whenever you expect income to be coming in. You can also discuss your situation with your lender and set up a payment plan. They're going to be much more willing to work with you if you actually talk to them rather than ignoring their phone calls. Obviously, working in student loans and collections part of our organization, our collectors really don't like it when you avoid their phone calls. They just want to work with you in order to resolve the issues. And make sure to put all agreements in writing. So if you have a verbal conversation, you need to follow it up with an email or make sure that it's in writing so that you can cover your butt later. So there are a few things that you can do in order to make sure that you're set up for success as far as it has to do with credit. You can shop around for good interest rates, obviously.
It's also really important to read the disclosure statement, so knowing what your interest rate is going to be. Is your interest rate going to change after a year? Sometimes certain credit cards may offer a deal on the first year. Is there an annual fee? What kind of rewards are there? And also, in general, what other fees are associated with the credit card?
If you have a lot of different debt payments to take care of, if you pay off the one with the highest interest rate first and then move from there using something called a debt snowball, that can really help you eliminate debt in a much quicker fashion.
Paying your bill on time and paying off as much as possible every month. That really cannot be overstated. That's just paying your bill on time is imperative to maintaining a good credit score. So,
obviously, saving money for emergencies is an important aspect of making sure that you're prepared for any financial emergencies, but it also can help you overcome credit obstacles.
Avoiding having to use credit cards for unexpected expenses. That's why that emergency savings is so important, so you don't have to use credit as a tool to pay for unexpected things. So.
And the fact that small amounts add up goes both for saving as well as using credit. So if you swipe every meal and not pay attention to what you're spending, it's going to add up. And if you don't pay it off at the end of the month, it's going to accrue interest, and then the interest can capitalize if you don't pay that off. So it's important to be aware of your financial lifestyle and what you're doing with your credit and budgeting in general. We're also on all types of social media if you want to keep in contact with us. We have tweet chats every Thursday between 4 and 5 p.m. Central Standard Time. So if you're on Twitter, you can use that as a vehicle to keep in touch with us. But we're also on Facebook and YouTube and Foursquare. So that's the best way to keep in contact with us. And if you want to check out our website, it's studentmoney.uillinois.edu, and all of our contact information is available there as well. And we're going to hand it over to Teresa.
Okay. Oops. Okay, thank you, Andrea and Alex. So my part of the session is to go over how credit and budgeting ties in with financial aid. And so you're probably wondering, like, what does it have to do with it? This part I'm going to go over is going to be about how your award letter, which includes your cost of attendance and your student loan package, this is how you're going to budget. If you're relying on student loans, that's your budget, and that's your income, is your student loans. And then also with credit, I'm going to talk more specifically how it affects your financial aid eligibility. To start, all of you probably have had an award letter so far for 13-14, and it includes your cost of attendance, which is your budget. The budget includes direct costs as well as the indirect costs. And the direct costs would be your tuition and fees. This is what you're going to be charged on your bill. And if you live in the dorms, that could also be a charge on your bill as well. So that those are your expenses that you know directly. The other items in the cost of attendance are estimates for your educational expenses as a medical student, your rent, food, transportation, miscellaneous, etc. These are all estimates that our office came up with based on being an average student. This particular budget is for an M1 here in the Chicago campus. This does not mean, though, that this is what your expenses are personally. So what we want you to do is kind of look at this cost of attendance to give you an idea of what you might be spending, and then kind of look at your rent that you have, the amount that you spend on food and transportation and those types of things, so that you can kind of figure out how much you actually need in student loans. This slide is just going to show you like what your expenses might be over the 4 years of medical school. The top part is just tuition fees only as a resident, non-resident, and the bottom includes that cost of attendance that I just showed you, but over the 4 years, including the 2 summers that you attend. So as you can see, these numbers get pretty high, and if you're relying on loans, this could possibly be your borrowing at the end when you're going to graduate. So it's best to really look at your personal expenses that you'll have as a student and see if you can't bring down those numbers in the amount that you're borrowing. Now, there are also other expenses that you'll have as a medical student, which will come in the years that you are here. Example, like your exams. We do include that in your cost of attendance for your 2nd and 3rd year, but if you, for whatever reason, have to take it over or take prep courses for it, those types of things, we can't include that in your cost of attendance again after the one time. So if that happens, you kind of need to see if you have any other funding to cover that test 2 times. The other eligible expenses that are listed here are ones that you would request through our office, and we would ask for documentation to support that so that we could possibly increase your budget or your cost of attendance to see if we can offer more loans for those expenses. And the other ones on the not covered side, residency applications, relocation, and purchase of a car, those are things that you would need, that's going to come out of your pocket. We can't include that as a financial aid item in your cost of attendance, so you need to budget for those other expenses that you might have. So now I just want to go over your student loan package and how you can understand it to help with the budgeting. Now there's 2 types of loans that we're going to offer once you complete a FAFSA, and that's the unsubsidized Stafford loan and the Graduate Plus. This slide is just showing a comparison of the two. They are both unsubsidized, so they are accruing interest once they've been dispersed throughout the life of the loan. The interest rates are not that far off, but the real difference is that the unsubsidized, that's pretty much guaranteed if you just have a FAFSA completed. For the Graduate Plus, you do have to go through a credit check to determine if you're going to be approved for that loan. The other important difference is that there's limits to the unsubsidized. So there's an annual limit of $40,500, and there's an aggregate or lifetime limit that you can borrow the direct Stafford loans. So that includes any Stafford subsidized and unsubsidized that you might have borrowed during your undergrad or grad school, and then added on to whatever you borrowed during medical school. This is the lifetime limit that you have in that particular loan. The Graduate Plus, annually, you can get the Graduate Plus up to your cost attendance, but it does not have a lifetime limit. So this is kind of a snippet of your award letter about where you see the funds that were awarded to you. If you remember the slide about the cost of attendance, this $59,000 over here, the $59,750, that's the cost of attendance for an M1. So how we award is we give the annual maximum and the unsubsidized because that out of these two is the better loan. And then to make up the difference, we're going to offer the Graduate Plus, and that's how that's going to be happening each year. So we can't offer more of the unsubsidized. The Graduate Plus is just going to make up the difference. So to kind of figure out from your total cost what you're going to have as your income for your life, for your lifestyle expenses that you're going to have monthly, you want to subtract out your direct costs, which would be tuition fees. If you live in the dorms, that could possibly be another direct cost to you. And then what is left over is what you would use for your living expenses. In this particular case, it's about $2,200 a month over a 9-month period because fall and spring is 9 months. The $2,200, that could be, that could fit your personal expenses. That could maybe be over your personal expenses or not enough. It just depends on what your expenses are. So to know how this all folds out, then you can kind of see like how much you actually need to maybe take less in loans if you don't need that amount. So ways to save. There's ways to save as you borrow, which would be like I'm talking about, borrow according to your personal expenses. You could also maybe choose to borrow $5,000 less a year. Also, you can return loan funds if you don't need them. So if you end up taking the maximum just to be safe, feel secure, and then let's say by the time spring comes around, you have leftover funds from fall and then you don't need everything that you got for spring, you can return those funds. And if you want to do that, you would just contact our office and we'll tell you what you need to do in order to do that. And what happens is the amount that you originally took, if you're gonna return those funds, that's gonna reduce the amount that you have to pay when you graduate, when you go into repayment. So it helps you in the long run. And then just remember, interest is accruing. So for students that have a financial situation where they're able to make payments while in school, and I don't expect students that are living off of loans to be able to do this, but not everybody's the same. So if you can pay the interest while you're in school, that can definitely affect how much you have to pay back in the future. And then just lifestyle, live as a student, live by your means. Find an affordable neighborhood to live in, possibly live with a roommate to cut down rent costs, and then these other ones that you've heard of before, like Andrea and Alex went over. You don't have to do them all, but even just making one change like that to reduce your spending will help in the long run. So now just to go over the credit part and how it affects financial aid. It's important because if you're relying on loans, the only two federal loans that we offer once we receive your FAFSA are the unsubsidized and Grad Plus. And the Grad Plus is credit check based out of the two. So there are scenarios where this could affect students where you might use up your unsubsidized staff rate eligibility and then only have Graduate Plus loans left to borrow. And if you don't have good credit, you could really run into trouble with this. So some scenarios that this could possibly happen is if you have prior debt from your undergrad grad school, and you're going to be borrowing loans during medical school, there's a possibility that you could reach that $224,000 in the unsubsidized and then only have Graduate Plus left. Other scenarios would be if you're in a dual program where your schooling is extended, or if you have a leave of absence or have to take off a semester or time during your schooling that will extend the time that you're going to graduate, you're going to be taking more loans, and you could possibly reach that maximum. And then the Graduate Plus would be your only option at the time if you don't have any other funding sources. The Grad Plus credit check, it is a hard hit or hard pull, like Andrea was saying, so it is an inquiry on your credit each time that happens. The credit check for the Graduate Plus, it expires in 90 days. So if you borrow a lower amount and then later on you decide you want more, if it's not within those 90 days, you're going to have your credit check pulled again. So one of the options that you could do if you don't want multiple credit pulls during a year is possibly to overestimate and take the amount of loans that later on, if you don't actually spend it all, that you can return it. And returning it, again, will reduce the amount that you will have to repay when you go into repayment. So direct loans, they look for adverse credit history when they're looking at the credit check. If you have any adverse credit history, which would be bad credit, you're going to get denied the loan. And these are the types of things that they look for. In the past year or so, the most common things that come up are like old cable bill or phone bill that wasn't paid a long time ago, that shows up as outstanding, and then the student would get denied for that. And if you're denied, there are two options. So it's not a lost cause. You can either get an endorser or someone to co-sign. An endorser would be someone who does not have adverse credit, and that will agree to pay the loan if you don't. Otherwise, you can appeal the denial decision. And if you had like an outstanding phone bill, if it was affordable for you to resolve that, you could go ahead and do that and then show proof to direct loans, and then they would review it, and they could possibly say, okay, well, you're accepted now, so that you could get the loan. So there are options if you're denied, and you just want to work with direct loans on that if it's the Grad Plus. If you're looking into private student loans, those are also credit check based, so you kind of want to do the same thing. And one thing I wanted to mention was an option in your fourth year. If you know that you might go into primary care, our office offers the primary care loan. This is only for M4s, and it's awarded the spring of your last year. It's a very good loan because it is subsidized, and that means that the government's paying the interest while you're in school and through the grace period, which is 12 months. It has a fixed interest rate of 5%, and it can be deferred through residency. When you apply, it does require parental income because it's looking for a disadvantaged background, and it also comes with a service obligation. So, but if you already know you're going into primary care, this might be a loan that would be a good option for you. It is given as an exchange of funds, so you would go ahead and borrow the amount that you needed in either unsubsidized Grad Plus or both during that year, and then if you were a recipient of this, we would replace those loans for this amount, for the amount that we would award you in this loan. And if you want more information, it is on our website, and the web address is here for you to look over that. And then we will also announce it in your fourth year of when the application is available, so you can apply for it. So there's just the last two things I want to go over about when you actually start repaying your loans. One is just to go over how interest and capitalization can affect you. interest is accruing on these loans from the time that you take them and through your medical school, and if you have loans from prior, they're just accruing interest. And what happens is that when you graduate, or not when you graduate, but when you go into loan repayment, your loans could capitalize. And that means that the amount that you originally borrowed during your 4 years, the interest that accrued would be added to that, and then you have this new larger balance on loans, and that starts to accrue interest. So your interest will start to accrue interest. And this is just an example of somebody, or a student, a medical student borrowing $170,000. During their 4 years, they would have accrued $25,000 of interest, and that's added together, and now that's their principal balance from here on out that starts accruing interest. And the servicers for the federal loans, they can capitalize on their own terms, so it can happen more often than the one time when you go into repayment. So it's just something to keep in mind, that if you can do these budgeting and borrowing wisely, that will reduce the effects of capitalization. And then the other thing is it's really important to make on-time payments with your loans. If you become delinquent or default, both of these can negatively impact your credit. So if you have any type of financial situation where you're unable to make a payment, just contact the servicer and they'll work with you, because you don't want this to affect your credit and affect things that come down the line in your life, like if you want to get a house, if you want to buy a new car, or open up a practice. You don't want to have these things lingering on your credit that will affect those goals that you have in the future. And then here's just some debt management resources. The AAMC, they have a lot of good tools and resources too, and on budgeting and loan repayment. You can just make an account with them and use their resources. And then mint.com, like Andrea and Alex were talking about before, it's really good for, I would say, a medical student, since your schedules are so busy, and this kind of does everything for you. And then really use, Student Money Management Center's resources as well, because they have great budgeting and credit and webinars. And the Student Loan Hero, definitely give that a try. If you're starting to borrow now, it is a good way to just keep track of that borrowing, since a lot of medical students don't have time sometimes just to think about how much they're borrowing every year. And then just, our office is always available for any questions. We're also on Facebook, so like us. And thanks for coming. And thank you, Alex and Andrea, for coming too. And if you have any questions, feel free.